Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar on why we sleep. This is Daisy Vijay, one of the North-South national team members, and I'm the coordinator for the webinars. I'm really glad to see you all here today. And we have amongst us two distinguished doctors from Milion Clinic to talk to us about the importance of sleep.
Thank you, Daisy. It's my honor and privilege to introduce the distinguished speakers, Dr. Valia and Dr. Shah. I had the pleasure of having Dr. Valia in one of our Seva International events here in Cleveland. She was one of the panelists answering all the questions from the public relating to sleep or lack of it and its impact on our physical and mental health. And today they're going to be talking about how to harness the power of sleep for success. So Dr. Valia is an associate professor in the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve University, where she subspecializes in diagnosis and treatment of complex sleep disorders. She is a medical director of continuous improvement in Neurological Institute. She is a staff at the Center of Sleep Disorders in the Neurological Institute, Cleveland Clinic. She is board certified by the American Board of Family Medicine and has additional board certification in sleep medicine. Dr. Valia received her M.D. degree from the Kasturiba Medical College, India. Dr. Valia's research focuses on the association of obstructive sleep apnea and cardiovascular disorders. Dr. Valia has given numerous presentations on topics related to sleep disorders regionally, nationally, and internationally. Dr. Vaishal Shah currently serves as an associate staff physician and director of pediatric sleep program at the Cleveland Clinic Sleep Disorder Centers and Pediatric Institute. He specializes in pediatric and adult sleep disorders and pediatric obesity management. Dr. Shah received M.B.B.S. degree from N.H.L. Municipal Medical College in India, followed by Masters in Public Health degree from Cleveland State University. He has completed residency and fellowship training in sleep medicine at Cleveland Clinic and subsequently board certification in pediatrics as well as sleep medicine. His background has enabled him to pursue his research interest of sleep disorders in obese children, specifically obstructive sleep apnea, evaluating the interplay of related co-morbidities and examining the impact of treatment on clinical outcomes. Without further ado, I would like Dr. Vaishal Shah to take over.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you for generous introduction. I am Dr. Vaishal Shah. So we have divided this presentation into two parts, and I will talk a little bit more about concepts of normal sleep and other things, followed by Dr. Valia will talk a little bit more about symptoms or how do you figure out whether you can have a sleep problem and so forth. Okay, so without further ado, let's go forward. All right, so this is one of my favorite quote. I love my sleep. My life has tendency to fall apart when I'm awake, so it may apply to many of you probably, and I found it and I really love it because I think that's so true, and we'll see why at the end of this presentation. So in the part one, we'll talk about few things. One, what does the normal sleep pattern look like across the lifespan? What is important of sleep in our health? Effects of sleep deprivation, which is one of the very hot topic discussed currently across the country. Some of the sleep hygiene measures which you can lead to the good quality of sleep overall. And then if there is anything specific related to current pandemic situation, we'll talk a little bit about that in a slide. Okay. So first, what does the normal sleep pattern looks across the lifespan? And when we talk about sleep, there are three important concepts. One is quantity of sleep, second is timing of sleep, and third is quality of sleep. So let's look at each one of them. So the quantity of sleep is heavily influenced by the age, and it's different at different age. So for example, in a newborn child, they can sleep up to 16 to 20 hours of day. Basically, we call it that their job is to sleep throughout the day. They have irregular sleep-wake cycle, means that they haven't developed yet what we call circadian rhythm. So they have these short periods of sleep, and in between some wake period, and this continues throughout the night. Infants have slightly less amount of sleep, between 13 to 15 hours, and their ability to fall and sleep through the night develops at about 3 to 6 months. And typically they have a shorter chunk compared to older kids. So for example, at 6 months, they can sleep 5 to 6 hours at a stretch at night, and then wake up and then can have another stretch after that. Most of the toddlers tend to sleep about 10 to 13 hours a day, and they tend to have about 1 to 3 naps a day, and most of the time they are around approximately between 3 to 5 years those naps starts fading away. Some kids, there are some variations, so some kids tend to fade away the naps earlier than the other kids and so forth. What about the preschool children? So they need about 11 to 12 hours on an average, and as I mentioned, nap starts decreasing from 1 a day to none, and very few kids at the time of school, means at around 5 years of age, tend to have naps. Pre-pubertal children, means 6 to 12 years, or the regular school age children, they need about 9 to 11 hours of sleep. There are very few kids in this age would be napping, so napping can be one of the red flag in this age and may suggest a problem. And generally they have tendency to have slightly later bedtimes compared to younger children and so forth. And as we get to the adolescent age, they ideally need about 8 to 10 hours. 9 hours is ideal. In my clinic, I have barely seen yet any adolescent who gets about that much sleep, and that's an honest disclosure. And they tend to have what we call natural phase delay, means their body's clock naturally tends to be slightly later. Therefore, they have difficulty falling asleep at earlier times and waking up early in the morning. As we get to the adult age, approximately between 18 to 65 years of age, that's when the sleep is somewhat consistently similar. So the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, after a lot of research, came up with the consensus statement that adults should need about 7 or more hours of sleep a night on a regular basis to promote optimal health. And majority of us, means 95% of adults need between 7 to 9 hours, average about 8 hours of sleep daily. About 1 to 5% of adults, so these are very small proportion, are normally people who need long sleep, means the greater than 10 hours, and similar amount need short sleep, means less than 6 hours. The key to know whether you're getting enough sleep or not is whether your daytime functioning looks optimal or not. Also, sleep-wake timing in adult is heavily affected by our social needs. So for example, job or other activities we tend to do during the daytime. As we further age, there are several changes happen. So after 65 years of age, and again, there can be a little bit of overlap in terms of age here. We need about 6.5 to 7.5, average about 7 hours of night. And there are several age changes which happen with the aging. So let's look at some of them. So many of us will experience that it may take longer to initiate or fall asleep. Our body's clock or circadian rhythm may advance, means you may be falling asleep early and waking up very early. For example, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, you may feel sleepy, but and you may fall asleep and wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. There is overall a reduction in amount of nighttime sleep. There is sleep fragmentation, means as we age, we tend to wake up more frequently compared to the younger population and so forth. There is decreased sleep efficiency, means amount of time you actually sleep compared to amount of time you spend in bed tend to be less. Means even if you spend time in bed 8 or 9 hours, you may not be able to get that many hours of sleep. There is decreased amplitude or low frequency of one important stage of sleep called slow wave sleep, and I'll talk about slow wave sleep in a second. But to give you an important information, slow wave sleep is one of the deepest phase of sleep, and it is somewhat also what we call recovery phase of sleep. So you can imagine that if you have less amount or amplitude of slow wave sleep, your sleep may not be very restorative at times. More time is spent in lighter stages of sleep. There is, as I mentioned, reduction in not only amplitude but the amount of slow wave sleep. There is latency to first REM period tend to decrease and amount of REM decrease. So REM means rapid eye movement sleep, and that in a simple language, it is also called a dream sleep. That is the second deepest phase of the sleep. So you tend to have less deeper phases of sleep as we age. Increased need of nap during the daytime, particularly in the afternoon time. And this has significant implication on driving and other things, which we'll talk about in a second. And then as we age, we are more likely to develop sleep disorder. So you can see that the sleep alters throughout the lifespan, particularly as we age. There are several changes happening to our sleep. So what about timing of sleep? So that is a second important concept. In a scientific language, we call it circadian rhythm. To simply explain you, like we have clock outside, like day and night, our body has clock inside. So there are two important clock. One is what we call master clock, which is in the brain. And the second concept which we have learned is similar to that. There are peripheral clocks, means each one of our organ and cells also have a clock inside. Now, these two clocks work in synchrony via different hormones or neurological signals sent by this master clock, right? But this, in order for this master clock to function well, it has to synchronize with the clock outside, means the day and night and Earth's rotation and so forth. And it does by getting certain cues from our environment outside. So the important concept here is, if your internal clock inside the body and external clock outside the body is synchronized and stays similar, then you tend to get good consistent sleep. If it is dysynchronized, then you tend to have some problem. A quick and important example is, if you travel to India, right, you travel about 10 to 12 time zones, right? So suddenly your internal body's clock is still in the US time versus external clock is in India time. So you may experience that big jet lag. So that's a simple concept. If you understand, that is where the circadian rhythm or the timing of sleep comes into picture. So what influences this clock, right? There are several, as I said, cue. Sunlight is one of the strongest cue. In the morning, sunlight goes through the eye. In the master clock, it drives an important chemical called melatonin down. Melatonin at night goes high and makes us sleepy. So in the evening, particularly when sunlight goes down, this melatonin is gradually rising. And at the time when we fall asleep, this melatonin is at the peak. So in the past, and our ancestors, when they didn't have a lot of digitalization, they tend to follow like light dark cycle, and their sleep tend to vary according to that various or several hundred years ago. And that can be explained by this biologic clock or circadian rhythm. There is one more very important factor which we can use to our advantage in order to get good night of sleep. That is our own behaviors. So cues from our own behaviors, such as consistent bedtime or wake up time, when we go to school or job, when we eat meals, when we exercise, these are all cue for this internal clock to stay synchronized with outside. For example, if like somebody who works like first shift versus second shift versus third shift, they would have different cues to their internal clock, and with those different cues, the timing of this melatonin going high or low will differ, and so forth. So these behaviors are very important in keeping our internal body clock or circadian rhythm synchronized with the outside environment. The third important concept is the quality of sleep, right? So what you are seeing, the picture here is a representation of one night of how we sleep. You can see here it's about 11:30 at night, and this is about 6:40 in the morning. First, we are awake right up here. Then we start getting drowsy. That's called non-REM sleep, or further divided into non-REM 1 sleep. And then there are stages, what we call non-REM 2 sleep, and our body starts cycling through different stages throughout the night. And this is an important concept, because if body does not cycle through the stages pretty well, we don't tend to have good quality of sleep. The third, and as I mentioned prior to this, an important stage of sleep is called non-REM 3 or slow wave sleep. And this is the deepest phase of sleep. This is very restorative sleep. And then the REM or dream sleep. So you can see in the first half, there is lots of restorative sleep, non-REM 3, and then the second deep phase of sleep, REM sleep, tends to happen in cycles throughout the night, but more so in the second half of the sleep. A lot of us may experience that right before we wake up in the morning, we may be seeing intense dream. That's because of this phenomenon. Why is this important? So if a one good long chunk of sleep, such as 7 or 8 hours, allows our brain to go through these normal stages of sleep much better than two different chunk of, let's say, 4 or 6 hours and then 1 or 2 hour of nap and so forth. So in order for us to have this good quality restorative sleep, that's why this concept is important. So approximately about a fourth of our night is spent in dream sleep, and about 15% of night is spent in non-REM 3 or the slow wave sleep, and rest is split between other stages and so forth. And as I mentioned, REM is when we dream. So what is the importance of sleep? Why do we sleep, right? Why can't we just stay awake all night and continue to function? So first, it is one of the most important stages in the body where body and brain has the restoration. It is same as basically driving car all day, and in the evening or after a certain time, it needs the rest, right? In order to restore and so forth. So a lot of tissue which are worn off during the daytime, there is a constant restoration process going on in body as well as brain. It facilitates the wastage and then its clearance from the central nervous system. So we use a lot of our brain throughout the day, either we work or do other activities and so forth, and it uses energy and creates waste, and this all is cleared when we sleep and so forth. So it's very important that waste is not gathering inside the brain and creating problem over the period of time. It is an energy conserving stage, means at night our body tends to use a very low amount of energy, and it preserves it for the daytime when we need the energy the most. There is clear evidence that it has a very important function in memory. So it reinforces memory and leads to the consolidation. So throughout the day, the things we learn gradually gets consolidated at night. Means in the brain there are what we call synapses, or the joints in the neurons are building up, which leads to the consolidation of the information we gather. And over the period of time, it is stored in the brain, and we can recall because of this. There is clear evidence that several important parts of the immunity, particularly certain cells such as cytokines and other things, are produced at night and so forth. So this is very important, particularly in the times like this, like pandemic, right? When we are facing a dreaded virus, and our body's immunity needs to be at the highest level. So if those are not produced very well, we tend to get sick more often and so forth. It is important in the regulation of temperature. So at bedtime and after that, our body's temperature gradually starts going down, and then somewhere in the middle of night our body's temperature is very low, and then gradually it starts getting up and prepares our brain to gradually wake up in the morning. So it is important in managing the heat and the cold cycle in the body. It is also important in mood regulation, hormones, and growth, which we'll see in a second in the sleep deprivation section. But some of the key hormones, particularly growth hormone in kids, is very high, or it peaks during the slow wave sleep. So it's important for their growth. Some of the appetite producing or suppressing hormones follow our circadian rhythm or the sleep cycle and so forth. So if you don't sleep well, you tend to have problem with those hormonal regulation and so forth. So these are the main key functions of sleep in the body and health. So with that concept, let's look at what happens when you deprive yourself of sleep, right? And again, the consensus statement from American Academy of Sleep Medicine said sleeping less than 7 hours on a nightly, on a regular basis, we have now enough evidence that it is associated with several adverse health outcomes, including weight gain, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, depression, and increased risk of death. Does it causes? Not maybe directly, but it's associated with it. Means it can add to you or increase your risk with other risk factors of having one of those problems. Sleeping less than 7 hours a night is also associated with impaired immune function, increased pain and impaired performance, and increased error and greater risk of accidents. Sleeping more than 9 hours on a night on a regular basis may be appropriate for some young adults, as we saw that some people tend to be long sleeper, but we don't know what other health risk, either positive or negative, it can pose to our health. So let's look at some of this key concept and so forth. So the Center for Disease Control, which is one of our health governing body, conducts a survey every about 5 to 10 years, and it's called Healthy People. So this particular, they have collected a lot of data, and these are several thousand normal people or people with the sleep problem. And they ask what proportion of adults do get sufficient sleep. So as you can see in the past few years, about 67, means about 2/3 of the population tend to report that they get sufficient sleep. But it also means that about a third, which is a quite a large number of people, are sleep depriving themselves and so forth. Similar to that, proportion of 9 to 12 grader, means in adolescent age, who get sufficient sleep is very low. As I mentioned, only about a fourth of the population in that particular age tend to get age appropriate sleep. And as you can see here, almost all the colors, none of the colors are more than 33%, means about a third. And nearly it's across the country, that's the case. So why is it important, right? Let's look at a very important concept. So there are neat experiments and a lot of experiment done in this particular area. So one of my favorite one is this one. So they looked at the truck traveling at and several of them at 60 miles an hour, and they saw how many angle of trips. So literally 4% angle means just a slight shift in the steering wheel, and only for 2 seconds. When truck travel, it threw it off by 190 feet, and it was completely out of the lane. So essentially, if your attention or vigilance is not perfect for two seconds, and if you just drift a little bit, you're going to be completely in the separate lane. Okay, so they went further. A lot of these are done by either simulation and or in the real life. So they went further and looked at when are the most accidents happening. So as you can see here on the lower axis, this is from midnight to 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., and so on to noon, and then the afternoon, and then the evening. So you can see the first peak is right in the middle of night, right? This is when a lot of people tend to stay awake late and sleep deprive themselves. Also, it is known that this is somewhat more prominent in younger adults and so forth, because they tend to stay awake a lot more in the late night. And as you can see, once we are fully awake, that in the early morning times or early to mid morning, that gets less. And then in afternoon there is another peak, and this is when they found that most of the people, when they have this peak, tend to be in the older age. And as I mentioned, as we age and get above 65 years of age, we tend to feel like napping in the afternoon, and they are implicating one of the reason as having these motor vehicular crashes in the afternoon and so forth. Now, they also looked at what is the rate of motor vehicle crashes in 100 million miles travel due to drowsy driving. Means when you're sleepy and driving, what's happening? So as you can see, consistently in last about 4 or 5 years until about 2015, it has gone up, and it's nearly close to about 3 per 100 million miles traveled. To give you a perspective, right? In the United States, roughly its population is about 300 million. Let's assume that about a third of the adult are driving for work every day, or for some other reason every day, right? So that's about 100 million people. And as I mentioned here, for every 100 million miles, means everybody, all of these 100 million people, if they drive 1 mile, for that 1 mile driven, for all of us, there are chances that there are 3 car accidents due to drowsy driving. So this is huge. You can imagine the impact sleep deprivation can have, particularly on this particular aspect, and it can lead to a lot of injury or death and so forth. So because of this, the Healthy People or CDC made as a 2020 and 2030, there are 4 very important goals they have, and couple of them are to reduce the rate of vehicular crashes, as well as increase the proportion of students in the grade who can get sufficient sleep and so forth, as well as the adults and so forth. So you can see it is given a lot of national importance at this point, because to reduce the health hazard related to insufficient sleep. Now, what else can sleep deprivation can do, right? So the acute means short-term sleep deprivation. So let's say if you stay awake all night, one night, right? So total sleep loss for one night. What we have noted is there can be lapses in attention, or disturb executive functioning. So executive functioning means our ability to tease through the complex problem, particularly at work or any other activity. We need to constantly use our brain in order to keep on solving those problems and so forth. So there are lapses in those. We know that there is impairment in a newly learned skill. So if you learn something new today about a software or other things and so forth, we don't tend to learn very well. And there are impaired mood in healthy individuals. So these are not only people who have a mood problem such as depression or anxiety. They tend to have amplified effect of this. However, even people who are healthy, they tend to have low mood or they tend to feel more anxious. If you have chronic sleep deprivation, means if you're consistently not sleeping well, if you're keeping yourself deprived of sleep for less than recommended for a long period of time, minimum, let's say about a week, or constantly over the over longer period than that, then we have noticed there is reduced metabolism in brain over the long term. Therefore, our brain tends to react slow to a lot of situations. If you have partial sleep deprivation, means less than 7 hours a night, there is steady decline over the period of time in performance at work. They have done simulated what we call vigilance tests. So these are the tests similar to the truck driving, which I showed you. And they noted that there are lapses, or when the patients were, or people were responding to the questions or other things, they were responding falsely, or they had very slow response to those testing and so forth. And this has been proven in real life situations also. And there are negative effect again on the mood, as I mentioned. If you have extended periods of sleep deprivation, means you continue for several days or months, it disturbs your ability to integrate information, means what you're seeing around you, what you're learning around you, it's harder to take all into account and to be able to tease through it and make complex decision, which can be important for job, business, other aspect of life, motor skills such as driving or other things. And it reduces your anxiety or pain threshold, means if you suffer from anxiety or pain, it makes it harder for you to be able to handle those. In both type of sleep deprivation, acute or chronic, as I mentioned, it has shown that your the tendency for growth hormone tends to be less, means this is very important in kids. They tend to have trouble with growth if they are constantly sleep deprived. One of the important chemical in the body is called leptin, and that is if it is high, that tends to increase our hunger. And because of that, plus if you are sleep deprived for a long period of time, your metabolic rate in the body tends to be lower, so we tend to gain more weight, and this is how it is associated with the increased chances or obesity or related problems and so forth. And it impairs the immunity. So in either case, you tend to have some of the negative impact on your body and mental health both. What happens when you're trying to recover? So lots of studies, but one of my favorite, for 3 nights, let's say if you are sleep deprived for a certain period of time, let's say 1 full night, or at least like 3, 4, 5 nights. After that, if you try to be in the bed for 9 hours, the reaction time to certain things of those testing did not completely return to normal. So what does it mean? That your body to recover from sleep loss completely may take longer, and longer you keep it sleep deprived, more time you may need, or your brain and body will need to recover from that and so forth. So it does not only have detrimental effect right away, but even in a recovery phase, you tend to have negative impact on your health and so forth. So there are a lot of time in our clinic which I tend to see some of the common myths. One, I can sleep less during the weekdays and recover during the weekends, and we'll talk about that in a second. Even though I sleep less, I'm okay while driving, right? So keeping yourself sleep deprived is like a bad debt. So think it somewhat, let's say your body generally needs about 8 hours of sleep, and every night you are sleeping only 6 hours, right? So you're keeping 2 hours of debt every single night, right? If we take a mortgage from bank, or for one or other reason, house or car or other things, what we do is we it's harder to pay back off a big chunk at a time, and that's why we pay off in the installments, right? That is the same concept about sleep. If you don't pay off in installments, you tend to gather this big debt, and what's going to happen, that bank is going to come after you and so forth. In our situation, our bank is our own health, and so forth. So if you are sleep deprived every night for about 2 hours, at the end of 5 weekdays, you are gathering the debt of 10 hours. So think on the weekend, not only you need regular 8 hours, but you have to catch up at least about 10 hours. Means essentially you need a eighth day in a week in order to really sleep in and help yourself like recover. Also, as I mentioned, if you keep on sleeping short, our body or brain does not go through all of those stages, and you don't have a high quality of sleep or restorative sleep in the morning and so forth. Okay, so you want to give it a consideration about consistent sleep throughout the weekdays and weekend and both. Okay. So I hope with that introduction to normal sleep and sleep deprivation, let's go back and talk about what can we do to ensure a good quality of sleep. And this is a concept what we call sleep hygiene. Like we keep our body healthy by certain hygiene steps, such as brushing or taking shower every certain time and every day or so forth. Sleep also has certain hygiene steps we can implement at home and can help yourself. So before I go forward, I wanted to make a couple of notes about caffeine and alcohol. What does caffeine do, right? So caffeine has an effect on a chemical in the body called adenosine. Now, if you all remember from your high school classes, there is a fuel cell in the body called ATP. This is like gas for the car. This ATP is made up from this molecule called adenosine, and adenosine is one of the very potent sleep inducer and so forth. So throughout the day, what ends up happening is as we do different activities, work, use our brain, body, exercise, this ATP breaks down into adenosine and we gather throughout the day. And at night, the adenosine is so high that it helps us fall asleep as well as have good quality restorative sleep. Coffee does not allow adenosine to work in the brain and so forth. That's why in the morning, if you are like sleepy, you may feel awake because of that caffeine and so forth. Under ideal circumstances, if you get consistent sleep every day, at the night, all this adenosine is used back to restore the body and get back to ATP. So ideally in the morning, you shouldn't have a lot of adenosine left or should not need a coffee and so forth, right? Why is this important? So coffee also in the body to just get the what we call half-life, means a half the amount in the blood to clear up. It takes about 3 to 5 hours, and it may stay in the body or blood up to 8 hours, and so forth. So if you use it consistently right before the bedtime or closer to bedtime, it has that stimulating effect and wouldn't allow you to fall asleep. To give you the context, a normal 8 ounce of cup, what we drink at home, would have approximately 100 milligrams of caffeine, somewhat plus or minus. Up between 150 to 400 milligram before the bedtime has been known to delay the sleep onset, reduce the quality and amount of sleep. In some of our favorite places for coffee, each cup of them, even the small or tall or other sizes, tend to have between these ranges and so forth. So the key point I wanted to mention here is 1 or 2 cup earlier in the day is okay, but not close to the bedtime. Okay. What about alcohol? So it really depends on the timing and blood concentration of the alcohol. What is known is 1 to 6 standard drinks. If you take about 30 to 60 minutes before the bed, the peak level it reaches right before the bedtime. So you may feel very sedating. We tend to see many people trying to use alcohol as one of the sleep aid or sleep inducer. There are several issues with that. You may feel sedating initially, but tolerance develops within 3 to 5 nights. So you may need higher and higher and higher dose of that, and this is a bigger problem. So it not only gets rapidly metabolized in the body, but the metabolites it makes, and once it's out of the body, that significantly disrupts the quality of sleep in the second half of the night. It leads to a lot more waking up, and it affects that dream or REM sleep, and that's why it has negative impact on how you sleep throughout the night and so forth. And so forth. So even though you may feel like, okay, I may fall asleep, but the quality of sleep is not so great. Also, it has effect on relaxing the muscles. So we tend to see worse obstructive sleep apnea and breathing, particularly when alcohol is consumed in a heavy amount and closer to the bedtime. During the daytime, it has again that sedating effect, so that can be very dangerous for driving. So the bottom line, social drinking is up to you, your choice. In terms of heavy drinking, closer to the bedtime should definitely be avoided, and so forth, due to these reasons. Okay. So that brings us back to the concept of sleep hygiene, and this is the most important slide and concept for today. So let's look at what are the steps you can take in order to help yourself. So let's look at first, consistent wake up and bedtime, right? It goes back to that body clock or the circadian rhythm. Particularly more important to your body is wake up time. If your sleep wake schedule is disrupted, first work on that. Fix your wake up time, calculate back approximately how many hours of your body needs, and set your bedtime according to that. So keep it consistent. Second, have a buffer time before the bed. So in the morning, we wake up, and why don't we just right away rush to the work, right? We keep a little bit of time to prepare our brain and body. We brush our teeth, we shower, we take breakfast. That's a buffer time in the morning for our brain from that sleep state to wake up and get ready for work and optimally function. In current situation with all the electronics and everything around, we tend not to keep that buffer time at the bedtime. We right away hope that we will turn off the TV, we will turn off the electronic, and our brain from that stimulated state will be able to fall asleep quickly. So that's why you need that particular buffer time for your about 15 to 30 minutes before your bedtime, to reduce that brain activity from the constant ongoing daytime situations, and allow it to calm down and fall asleep. During that buffer time, no electronics, particularly anything with LCDs and LEDs, tend to emit bright light, certain wavelength light that tends to, as you can imagine, they can be as powerful as sunlight. So they tend to shift your body's clock later and so forth. Okay. Also, the content of the electronic can be stimulating enough for the brain so that it's harder for brain to wind down and help you fall asleep. A relaxing bedtime routine can be very helpful, and so forth. So a lot of people like meditation, just deep breathing, relaxation techniques. A lot of those things can help at the bedtime. So during that buffer zone, you can use that to have relaxing bedtime routine. As we discussed, avoid caffeine close to the bedtime, particularly in last third of the day, and heavy alcohol, particularly close to bedtime. Quiet and dark environment is very important. So disturbances from noises, we get patients who are disturbed by slightest noise, such as either pet barking or vehicle outside moving, sometimes a spouse snoring, and so forth. Or the dark environment particularly helps with that melatonin going high at night in order for your brain to fall asleep and so forth. Slightly cooler temperature between 69 or 70 to 74 degree tend to be more sleep promoting than very cold or very hot temperatures. There is a huge variation in individual to individual about the temperature, but that's approximately a normal range where our body tends to optimally fall asleep. Regular exercise, not too close to bedtime, not within last half an hour, but before that, has that effect of generating more adenosine and relaxing at the end of the day in order for us to fall asleep and so forth. Sunlight in the morning, particularly at a consistent time, can help you fix that clock also. So about 30 minutes in the morning. A lot of time I tell my patients that if you have a sunroom or other things in your home, sit in there and eat your breakfast there, or go out for a walk in the morning for 15 to 30 minutes. That's going to help you really set your clock if it is disrupted and so forth. And then avoid heavy meals close to bedtime. So light snack such as milk or other things is sleep promoting, but the heavy meal tends to activate the body's metabolic processes and tends to keep awake. So hopefully one or combination of this will help you to really improve your quality of sleep. Last important concept is a lot of patience. Let's say if your sleep is disrupted and you're trying all these sleep hygiene measures and so forth, it is not gonna change your sleep right away on one night, right? It needs a lot of practice. So I would probably give it a try for a few weeks before deciding whether it's working or not. Um, all right, so what about COVID specific situation, right? So right, it's so new for us that there are no research yet on how COVID affects sleep or sleep affects COVID and so forth. So what I'm going to talk about today is what we are commonly seeing in the clinic. So we're seeing, hello? Yeah. we're seeing a lot more anxiety, at least either related to COVID itself or the whole situation, right? Economic downfall and other and so forth. So we are seeing insomnias a little bit more currently in our clinic. Lot of us are staying in home. It's hard to go out at the moment, and when we stay home, we tend to slack around a little bit in terms of when we go to bed and when we wake up and so forth. So we tend to see a lot of variability in sleep wake schedule, and particularly in the morning for a while. With the stay home order, we are not allowed to go outside, so it was hard to get that sunlight, right? Also, there is increased tendency to be sedentary when you have to stay home, and therefore it leads to weight gain. So that may lead to increased sleep apnea and so forth. What you can do during that time is stick to those sleep hygiene specific measures, right? If you have anxiety, first you can try to implement some of the relaxing measures at the bedtime and on a consistent basis for a few weeks and see if it helps. If you have a variable sleep wake schedule or your sleep wake schedule is completely disrupted, try to fix your wake up time first, get some sunlight in the morning. Hopefully now with summer gradually starting, that will be very helpful. And according to that, calculate your bedtime back according to your age and so forth, and try to keep that bedtime consistent. Typically it will take about 2 to 4 to 6 weeks maximum for your sleep wake schedule to get back on track, and so forth. And having a little bit of activity, even if just walking or some exercises, can help you not have that additional weight gain to induce sleep apnea and so forth. So when should you find help? So if you have consistently tried about techniques for a few weeks, or if you have symptoms of sleep disorder, which Dr. Walia is gonna cover in part 2 after this, you should seek help after that. And help can be a primary care provider, a sleep doctor, or there are even psychologists who are more trained in the sleep disorder to help with the problem, particularly with the insomnia and so forth. So bottom line today, sleep is one of the best medication, to me at least. And then it is completely free and it does not require prior authorization from the insurance. So I hope I convinced you to have a good night of sleep, and use it as a tool, because there is no cost to it. Okay. So now I hope you understand why I love my sleep, because when I sleep, my life is great. Otherwise, when I'm awake, it has tendency to fall apart, and so forth. So with that, I'm gonna thank everybody. I've put a couple of good resources. This is one of my personal favorite book, which I've read, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And if you are looking for some tips for your kids and so forth, babysleep.com has been developed by some of the collaboration between parents, sleep expert, and the behavioral health expert, and so forth. So it has tons of good information, including like some of the resources. So hopefully this will help you to, if you would like to read more and so forth. And these are some of the references I have used. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. I'm gonna switch it over to Dr. Walia, who is gonna talk about some of the common sleep disorders. Give me 1 second.